All right. Well, I am so excited for us to return to these weekly Kvaroy Arctic updates, and especially when there's such incredible news coming from Alf-Gøran Knutsen and the work that Kvaroy Arctic is doing in Norway. So welcome. Good afternoon. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm good. I'm safe and healthy, so that's good.
That's right.
And yeah, I'm out traveling just in the area, so I'm not in my normal environment, but not far from home. So
not far from home. You're in Buda?
In Buda.
So
yeah.
let's. I am sure that a lot of people are anxious for us to get right into the subject, because this has been breaking news for the last week or so. Of course, you've been talking about the potential of investing in land-based farming for several years, but really looking at the right technology and wanting to find the right investment and partner to make. So can you tell us a little bit about that history, and then kind of what that is going to look like as we work towards the future over the next couple of years?
Yeah, for us, the land-based, of course, has been something spinning in the background there, being curious and also being where we are and the position we have taken over the years. We have been presented a lot of projects. We have had meetings with people that want to do land-based in China, in Saudi Arabia, in the US, in Norway, in Sweden, in Denmark. So, and looking at all those plans and all those new technology opportunities, there's always one thing that is good with where we are and what we do is you have the logistics around it. The logistic is a fantastic thing when it comes to transporting feed and transporting fish on water. It's a much easier thing that has been done for many years. So we started talking with these guys that we now have partnered up with. We started talking to them, I think it was 4 years ago, the first time. They came to us, they had an idea, we looked at it, it had some potential then, I have to say. I normally don't take those kind of presentations up to the board, but this one I took all the way up to the board and had them present the project and their ideas, and they had good ideas. They were missing something, but they had good ideas. So we agreed that we would keep in touch, and they work on the solution and work on the technology and also work getting the license, because that's of course an important thing in Norway. You need the license to produce on land. They are free, but you need the paperwork in order to start planning a project. So they had a really good, the guy that's the mind behind it has an engineer degree, so he knows a lot about pump technology and those kind of things. And he had a really good idea on how to pump enough water and how to get it from a deeper point without using too much energy. Again, getting enough water and all of those things. And they had also the right location. That was quite important for us, looking at where we are and where they are, and where the feed, again with the logistics, where the logistic is available, where you can easily start producing, and you can start getting feed without having to truck it by truck to where you are, or those kind of things. So we had ongoing conversation. They of course wanted us on board because of what we could bring. At that point we could bring the production planning, production knowledge and knowledge about biology and fish that they didn't have. And then again, in those 4 years, we have built a lot of things in 4 years. We have built the smolt capacity, the sale, distribution, logistic for that. So it made us a more and more interesting partner for them. So at the end there, when we started looking at it, it was the best way of doing it was integrating it with what we do today, and integrating all the people and all the capacities together to start working together as a part of Kvaroy, and have that project being built the way we feel you should build it, and also with our philosophy and with the sustainable focus, and trying to look at those important things like the footprint and the CO2, the carbon footprint, and looking at how can you best possible produce on land also and on sea, and be those two joined together. There's not a competition between sea-based and land-based. It's you have to think about how can you best possible way feed as many people as possible.
Right.
So for us that was very, very important, and we found the people that we're working with now, the people behind this idea, are also people that has the same thoughts that we have, and that makes me 100% sure that we have partnered up with the right guys and the right people that to start developing a land-based project that thinks sustainable and thinks about producing a salmon that's good for the market.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, I think that what the interesting thing was, somehow this dialogue developed that was land-based against ocean-raised. And then that began very early on. I mean, the NGOs, a decade ago when I started, the NGOs, when you sat down with Seafood Watch, a land-based farm got an automatic green by submitting its plans and sending $25. And of course, anything that was ocean raised got an automatic red. Now that has evolved, of course, and there are a number of different, inputs in this certification and recommendation scheme. But that dialogue and kind of that tension started from the very beginning and continues today. So if you speak with most that are invested in land-based, they would probably sit and say that they want the ocean raised farms out of the ocean. But when you brought this to me early on, I was over the moon, because I've had this, this, I was like, what? This is amazing. Because to me, it's no different than the wild versus farmed conversation. Sustainability and the right answers to get where we need to go in terms of our food system is a multi-pronged solution. And we talked a little bit about why that was so important. So talk to me a little bit about that philosophy, because finding the right partner, finding the right technology, we'll get into that in a second, but just the idea philosophically that was necessary.
No, because for us, our area and our production is we are situated where the conditions for farming are extremely good. But the sites and the sites available in our area to increase the production is not so good. There are farmers around us, and there's no obvious options for where to continue farming. It's either offshore or land-based.
Yes.
And for us, with the conditions, with the water, and exploring that, taking advantage of the water available also in our area, the temperatures, all of those things that you can take as an advantage, instead of it being somewhere else where you have to cool down the water.
Right, where all of the systems have to be manipulated, essentially.
Yeah, essentially. That is why, and I think it's the war between land-based and sea-based. It's not a good thing. The technology and the knowledge with biology and how to produce a salmon is there in Norway. We are the biggest producers of salmon. We should be out there, and we should do land-based also, and because we have the knowledge to do it in a good way. It's just about focus, and I know a lot of big farmers doesn't want to invest in land-based, and I understand why.
Mhm.
but at the same time, because they feel it would be a competition against what they are doing on sea. But it's all about the feeding of people and how to feed them in a most sustainable way. The area that we are using or going to use for our land-based is an area that there's no farming option. There's no other options of doing anything else but, or maybe industry. But this is a good way of taking advantage of a land area that you can produce a huge amount of food on. So it's the whole. I like the whole idea of not a circular economy, but a thought of both of those things together, and then you can start building on that again to be a circular economy, because we can take advantage of the land-based to produce the fish to a certain size on land also, and have a bigger fish put on sea, and then use our sites better, and think you have to use the whole advantage together and think a little bit different. And that's what we are trying on doing now, and that's also what our part of our strategy for the future. And with the smolt, with the land base, with the sea farm, it's you have to use all of it together.
And then all of these having this channel that's just been developed in the last 5 months, that's this vibrant sales channel that is a market that's really hungry for the best in class sustainable salmon, like a truly sustainable salmon that we should talk about. One of the things that has come up about land-based systems is that they don't produce the quality of fish. And that, you know, when you've produced Kvaroy Arctic and it is this best in class, delicious, firm textured fish, very nutritious, that was one of the, I think, the caution points around land-based that's still sort of to be determined in the technology. Talk about what impressed you so much about this specifically that you think, I mean, time will tell, but that you're hopeful about in terms of how that's going to change on this system particularly.
Yeah, it's a long process, of course, before we have a finished product. And you know me, I normally don't go out and promise anything before we deliver. But it's the flow-through technology on this, mimicking what we're doing in the sea, with enough water flowing through the system to have the same environment for the salmon as we have in sea, makes it a huge advantage. The recirculated systems are harder to get. They're starting to, and eventually they will find ways to feed a salmon that tastes the same there, but you will always have that challenge. You will always have that problem with recirculated systems. And that's why I have lost my belief in it, because when you have to have more chemistry people working there than people actually feeding the salmon, it's harder, and it's a higher risk. There's risk with the flow-through system also, but there's always going to hang the risk with the recirculated is higher and bigger. So that's
these filtration systems, the UV systems that are being developed in order to be able to make sure first and foremost that the flow of water the ocean water that's being pulled in is the ideal situation for the salmon to be reared. So there's better technology in terms of that. Do you want to elaborate on that at all? How does that look? Because you had mentioned that where they're pulling water from this area is the right temperature. When you get the right depth, you don't get the sea lice.
Yeah, it's a multiple thing. It's first of all, of course, the sea lice. If you go lower than 10 meters, you're away from them. Then it's the temperature again. If you go too deep, it's going to be too cold, and if you go if you go too high, it's going to be with the sea lice. So what they have done, and what their idea is, or our idea is, to have two inlets, one on 40 meters and one on 80 meters, both of them with systems that UV filters the waters, of course, before it comes in. But you can change between those during winter time. For example, you go up to 40 meters where the water is a little bit warmer. It will still, and it will have will almost be the same temperatures as we have in our sea-based, and that's what's
without
so amazing.
manipulating it, really, it's amazing.
Yeah, without manipulating it, and you will have a more stable winter temperature. We have a very unstable. We can go from down to 2 degrees to 5 degrees being the lowest, but they will have a stable temperature during halting. So it's easier to plan production. It's easier to have a constant flow of fish going through the system. So it's what they have taught about and what they're bringing to us is very good. There are small things that we need to adjust, of course, but I feel we have the right people in our organization to help land this as a very good land-based project.
Best-in-class system. What about, let's talk a little bit about the outflow of water, because that's what you hear about is the concerns in terms of a flow-through system, and also the energy use. So address those two things for those, because you've thought so carefully about that as well, and the team from Arctic Sea Farm. Yeah,
together we've thought about that. Of course, the outlet of water and the effluent coming out, we're cleaning out as much possible as you can of the water, taking advantage of that and producing biogas and fertilizers out of that. Then you can then twist the feed to get the right result effluent wise also. So for example, our feed that has been cleaned from PCB and dioxins is a very, very good fertilizer, because it doesn't have any mercury or any of those substances in it. So it's a very, very good fertilizer. And biogas, of course, you can then start producing biogas that you can then again fuel the well boats and other things, the trucks even, and all of that.
This was extraordinary. You said now there's a well boat actually in production, and it will be done by the end of next year. You said
next year,
there are a couple that already are in existence, but Kvaroy Arctic will have one that actually is fueled on this.
Yeah, it will be. That will be a part of the system that we are using, and a hybrid solution with biogas. So that's amazing. And when it comes to power, of course, it's one of the things that people criticize the land-based for is that there's an extreme power usage. These pump systems that we have here are designed so that the power usage is high, but not as high as other systems. And also all the energy we'll be using for this plant is based out of the water power in Norway. So it's a green power source to make sure that it's the footprint again and all of those things that are under development is taken care of and making sure we're as low as possible.
The one thing I thought was so fascinating about this was the intersect with the systems that already exist for Kvaroy Arctic. So I wonder if we can talk a little bit about that, the investment then from egg to harvest. Now, rearing a fish on land will take a little bit of a tweak in the feed, obviously, but there are so many other things, I mean, in the breeding of the fish that really are going to produce as close to a Kvaroy Arctic. Ideally, we're still, obviously there's a ways to go, but ideally that's going to produce a fish that's as close to what's produced on the water. And talk about that, because I know you had mentioned that Yermund, you've got one of your team members is actually overseeing this and working very, very closely already right now with the entire integration of this to make sure that it truly can be a part of the family of salmon being produced by Kvaroy Arctic.
Yeah, for us, that's an important part, of course. And we are already working closely with the breeding company. And as you say, Yermund is working on how to fully integrate. And that was when we bought the small company, we kind of tried to look a little bit further ahead with this in mind, we were already in discussion with these guys when we were there. As I said, it's 4 years ago since we started. So we're trying to make sure that we breed and feed the same fish, like you said, making sure the production is as similar as possible, so we get the result that are as similar as possible. And that's Gjermund will be biologically in charge of all of this, having the oversight of production plans and integrating it with the breeding company that we're working with, making sure that we can select breeding fish that has been fully grown on land, and breeding a fish that is better or similar to what we do on sea-based, using the advantages from land-based. So it's amazing.
I think that this point about size, because there is a place where the economy doesn't work when you have to put so many inputs on land-based farms to a larger size, and that is a little bit easier to manage on the ocean-based, depending on what the weather conditions are. And I think that's brilliant. So really what you're thinking about is that there are these different channels for these fish to be sold into as we look at into market, particularly as so we have one differentiator, which might be the size, depending on what a customer would want, it sounds like. And then the other is, there are still customers that want to have only a land-based system or a green system and don't want to be supporting any of that ocean-raised fish.
That's with this integrated into our system, we'd have the option to go for those customers and sell to those customers through our channels. But the goal is, of course, that people see this as everything the same. Look at it as one product, not two different products. And that's our goal, to delete those lines between the sea-based and the land-based, to make sure that it's all green, of course.
And it is difficult, and it's an incredible investment to be able to develop the brand and to be able to develop the sales team and all of the things that you've done already in the last 5 months on for Kvaroy Arctic. And that had to have been looked at it as an amazing advantage as you were looking at coming into market and the type of expansion that you were doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we're investing for the future there too. And with the interest we have now in our salmon, of course, we need to look at how can we continue this good development. One of the options we were looking at early was finding farmers that would work with us, that would use the same feed and all of those things. But it's hard to, being only 5 months into market, it's hard to convince them that this is good. But I think we are showing that we're doing things right. We have an amazing team in the US with you and the rest of the team, and there is a market for this. There is absolutely a market for what we're doing, and it's a growing market. So we need to make sure we find ways to produce more fish.
And I think it's brilliant on so many levels for people that are listening. So we talk about it being sustainable because it's a balanced system, that we've got this honoring the ocean and what the capacity is for farming there, as well as creating balance and knowing what we can do on land. So you have different inputs, as you mentioned, coming into the food system. But to a certain extent, it also protects the farm, doesn't it? Because you can't always control whatever the environment is, even on land. That could be an issue with power. That could be, anything. I mean, you don't want to predict the future on that. Climate change certainly is changing the conditions potentially that we're dealing with on water. And you and I talked about, as a condition might change, or there might be something catastrophic that happens in either system, then it really does actually, as much as it is sustainable for the environment and for the food system, it also, doesn't it, at the end of the day, create a more sustainable business? Yeah,
absolutely. You have a a backup almost. Yeah, it's like you said, you have a backup, and that's making a more sustainable business for sure. It's there's always going to be, as long as it's biology and you're producing fish, there's always going to be problems or challenges, as we call them, not problems.
Yes, exactly.
So
Bumpy. Alf-Gøran says to me, it's not that it's going to be easy, it's going to be bumpy, but
yes,
we can like anybody with a good four-wheel drive Jeep, we can manage bumpy, hopefully.
yeah. As long as you just adjust the tempo to the bumpiness, then it's
That's
okay. So yeah, but it's absolutely, it's going to make our business and our integrated everything more sustainable and more durable. Absolutely, it's a word. Yeah.
And I think that that's the thing about Kvaroy Arctic. And we know there are a lot of people that tune into this, and we talk about often, what we feel like is our role, open sourcing the feed, really showing what the model can be, being open as the farmers were in the very beginning of farming in Norway, where they talked to one another and solved problems together. And I still see that kind of openness and spirit within us, where we say, look, this really warrants taking another look at. That those that are investing in aquaculture, that whether it's the big VC funds or private equity, all of those that are looking at the investments, the large salmon producers, that this really can serve as a model for what's possible. Because in order to be able to do what's right, we have to build a company of balance on a number of different levels. And this land-based, obviously this land-based conversation is exceptionally important in tandem with the sea-based. And for those of us in the US, it's interesting to me, if you haven't seen some of the aquariums, there are big aquarium systems, the kelp beds at Monterey Bay Aquarium and others that use these flow-through systems already, where they're some of the most amazing kelp beds, and the tanks that they use are flow-through systems where they're pulling the water from, say, Monterey Bay, bringing it into the aquarium, and then it's flowing back out through filtration systems. So I just want to say that, this is something that is such an exceptional model if done right, that I think that as we look at it and as it evolves, I know you're going to check back in with us, and we're going to talk about that, breaking ground in October. Is that right?
Yeah.
With the hope that 2 years later there'll be fish out of the farm, correct?
Yeah, that's the hope.
Yeah, that's the hope. So we'll be keeping everybody posted. It's really exciting. It is. And I think for our team and those that have just begun to talk about this, we are going to continue this dialogue. We want to be, explaining what the reasoning behind it is, hearing what you're thinking, hearing what Yerman's thinking, hearing what the rest of the team is doing, because there's so much to learn. And that learning comes from collaboration, and I think, and really looking ahead, as I've said about the team, looking down the road and around the bend. So thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate this farm update. It's an exciting day. Look for more to come, and we'll talk to all of you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.